Okay, we're going to do some reciprocal teaching on scene 5, Padraig, the Great Comet, 1843. Padraig, the Great Comet. Okay, as always with beginning of reciprocal teaching, the teacher invites everyone to sort of guess what might happen in the scene before they read it. And he might pick on the questioner to start off, and the questioner might, instead of coming up with a prediction, have a series of questions about the scene. He could predict as well. There's nothing to stop him doing that, but you might have some questions as well. What is so important about the Great Comet? What is a comet? And someone in the group, say the assessor, might say, well, a comet is a series of sort of meteors or boulders in space that sort of travel around at great speed. And the teacher might agree, and they might say, well, maybe we need to do a bit more research into comets as well, and that's a sort of point to make. Okay, so everyone then should read the scene either in a group or silently, or a mixture of both. And when you've read the scene, the first question is, what is it about? And the summarizer might say, well, you know what, I've been doing a lot of summarizing. I'm going to actually ask the motivator to summarize first of all, because it's quite a long scene. And the motivator say, sure thing, and we have this kind of beginning of the scene where Padraig falls into a painting, and which is in the National Maritime Museum, and the painting is of certain people looking up at an amazing comet, and this comet is of great interest, and the time devil seems to sort of suddenly fling them on to the comet, except it isn't the Great Comet. It is actually, we learn towards the end, the comet that is going to create life on Earth. And Padraig has a choice to make as to whether he helps the comet land on Earth, thus creating life, or not. And the scene sort of ends with Padraig being attacked by lots of rocks that seem to speak. And the assessor might say, well, actually, you know what, well done, because actually that's a pretty good summary of that scene, and it's quite complicated, so well done on that. And the teacher might agree. Is there anything else to add, summarizer and assessor, who are the people sort of who would be next up to speak? And the summarizer said, well, yeah, it's, I guess we learn, don't we, that the scene is set in South Africa at a time when the British were living in South Africa, or sort of ruled over it some time ago, and then it sort of goes massively back in time to the beginning of the Earth, which is a bit confusing. And the assessor might say, well, I would assess our understanding as being pretty good at this point. Are there any sort of things to clarify? So the assessor's sort of taking over the motivator's role here, because the motivator's done a lot of a summary. And the questioner might say, well, it's very confusing, sort of the change of scenes. Why is that happening? One moment, Padraig is in a museum. He falls into a painting. He's then sort of watching a comet in South Africa, and then suddenly he's sort of falling to Earth, isn't he? On a comet. And rocks are speaking, so I'm really finding it pretty difficult, to be honest. And the learning to learn chief might say, well, what are we learning about our learning here? And the teacher might come up with a point that, well, we seem to be sort of learning that we're able to sort of keep a lot of things in our heads at the same time, and that the way to really understand this is to sort of say out loud some summaries, and this seems to help us, doesn't it, sort of get a grip on what's going on. And the learning to learn chief might say, well, actually, you know what also would help me is just like writing some stuff down. So I think all of us should sort of write down a summary of what's happened in this scene so far, and then maybe the other scenes as well if we haven't done so, because we could do that in the form of a sort of mind map, a spider diagram, a flowchart, or we could draw pictures of the characters and just talk about what's happening to them. So what might be the best way for us? And the assessor might say, well, actually, I would prefer to draw pictures of the characters and just write down what's happened to each character. And the motivator might say, well, actually, I prefer to just do a flow diagram of what's happening in each scene, you know, so it starts with this event and it moves on to that event. And the teacher might say, well, actually, you know what, I would prefer just to write a summary, a free writing summary, and that would help me the most. And the learning to learn chief might say, well, what are we learning about our learning here? We're learning that we all have different ways of sort of summarising things, but we're also sort of realising that it is actually a really good idea to discuss what is happening with each other and then have a go at our writing and focusing on the work that way.